Thanks, Adam, for talking to me, man, about Italian studies. Like I
Thank
said,
you.
yeah, like I told you before we started recording, I'm a big fan of yours. I loved Give Me the Loot. I'm a big fan of Tramps, and I like Italian studies as well.
Thank you.
But for those who may not know about Italian studies, explain the movie a little bit for them, and tell me a little bit about where your idea for it came from.
Yeah, the story of the movie is about a woman, a writer, who becomes sort of unmoored. She loses her memory in a dissociative episode, and becomes lost in New York City, um, and ends up becoming connected to a bunch of teenagers, one in particular, that kind of guide her through this experience. And the idea for it came from conversations with Vanessa Kirby's star of the movie. We had been friends for years, and she called me and she sort of said, I have these gaps in my schedule. We shot the movie in four different segments, and so some of it. So it's the movie's very much told from her sort of point of view. So she doesn't know what day it is. She doesn't know what time it is. So it can jump from winter to summer within the span of a shot. Um, and uh, and so she was like, I have these sort of gaps where I could come in and make something. Um, and should we do it? And I was like, yeah. And we started to talk about, and I started to think about some ideas that I'd had, and it was really important for us to make something that should be made in this way.
Mhm.
That isn't just like, well, ideally we would make this for and shoot an 8-week shoot that's all together, but something that feels in itself, we embracing the scatteredness of the production and the unmooredness of the production. And Vanessa and I had a couple conversations about, she really wanted me to throw her out into the New York streets, and we had some conversations about the idea of being present, the idea of how our environment, how we interact with it, and how it affects us. And so those, I don't really like to start with a theme, but those were sort of things in the air, and I had an idea about a woman lost in the city, and I couldn't really crack it from a few years before. And I sort of thought, well, what if we just tell it from her point of view? Like, what if we never see the people searching for her, or never really, really just with her the whole time, and she's in every scene. Um, and that's where it came from.
Awesome. Hold on, my video camera is messing up here. There we go. Get it fixed. That's it's interesting that you say that the film was shot over multiple segments. We had the whole COVID thing going on right now and all that kind of thing. How did that affect your shooting? Did this shooting it in this way help, or was it because of COVID that you sort of did this and kind of work around it a little bit? It was interesting watching all the people on the streets
Yeah.
at certain points, the film
Yeah,
as
there was
well.
a moment.
Yeah.
We shot the movie before COVID. And when COVID hit, we something that we sort of said instantaneously was that we immediately have a period piece.
Mhm.
And then it's actually sort of interesting to see people's reactions to the movie, because a lot of people really grab onto the feelings within the film in terms of isolation, dissociation, memory, how we interact with each other, interact with our environments, as being something that feels very COVID relevant. But yeah, no, we were wrapped, and then we were in the post production. We were in the edit during COVID, and we're able to finish there.
One of the things I love about all your films is that they're kind of they're almost like travelogues in a way. Like it's like you're exploring different aspects of the city while these characters are kind of exploring themselves at this exact same time, finding their way. Like none of them are in the same place at the end of the movie as they are at the beginning, as they're kind of exploring at different aspects of the city. Is that something that you've been kind of aiming to do with each of your films, taking like a different slice of the city, looking at a different aspect of young people? Is that something you're aiming for intentionally?
I think I think it would be foolish for me not to sort of think about the through line between the three movies. They're all take place in the streets of New York. They all really are about youth and young, they center on young characters. I don't think of like the other projects I've had that haven't happened or that I'm working on
Yeah.
aren't that.
Yeah.
So it's sort of like, and I think after Tramps, it was like, one thing I know is I'm not going to make another indie taking to the streets of New York City. But Vanessa called me up and she
Right.
was like, let's do it. And the financiers were like, let's do it. And I was
Yeah.
like, let's do it. Like, we're going to do it. And so, but I do think I'm really interested. I do think if there is a through line in all the things that I'm writing and working on, and there is something about taking somebody who is in a place inside, literally, or just sort of stuck in a place and throwing them out on an adventure. And I really do think that is something I'm really is just sort of seems to be a common story thread for me. And I do think that one of the things I'm working with a low budget in New York is that you have this incredible production design of New York City. And so as you sort of sit like in this movie, you see her surrounded by thousands of people. You see her walking through these amazing expanses and all of that stuff that's free. So so in some ways it's a little calculated. It's a little like, how can we make this cinematic for the amount of money that we have? And there's the cinema's right out there.
It's interesting, watching it, is you say the film was shot, what, around 2018, 2019, maybe somewhere around there?
Yes. It was July 4th, 2018 was our start date, and we ended about a year later.
Vanessa Kirby was, kind of like a rising star at that point, but I wouldn't say she was like super famous at that point. How was it shooting like on the streets with her like that? Was she like somebody getting, because in the movie, like, she's kind of a celebrity, like
right. She's a well-known author. Yeah.
yeah. What was that like for shooting?
Well, it's interesting. I've been trying not to read too many things about the movie, but I did read something where somebody was talking about how you couldn't really do it with her now. And I think that's true.
Yeah, true.
We had a little bit of it. And so we had paparazzi, I think, on 2 days, but they were so low key. And we had one, because she is interacting with people on the street. And we had one where somebody came up to her and said that she looked like Princess Margaret from The Crown. And she stayed in character, and it was interesting. We kept it for the edit. It felt and ultimately like a gimmick. But no, overall, she was on the rise, and I think that in the modern clothes and the modern, she was mostly known for The Crown at that point. I don't think that she was noticed. And also there is a thing in New York where people just don't really care.
This is both a movie I would expect from you, but also like something I would not expect from you. Like
I agree.
It's definitely like when I read the plot of it and then I started watching, I was like, okay, this feels like an Adam movie. Okay, cool. But it's a lot more surreal and I guess ambiguous than your other two films, which I think are pretty straightforward for the most part. Was that also a design, or was that something that just sort of came about when you were Vanessa were kind of working out the details?
I'm surprised they made this movie. And I'm very happy with the movie, but I am surprised that I made the movie, and especially because like the first two are very crowd pleaser. Like, you're right, they're sort of like based in the kind of romantic adventure. How can we sort of give our own style and twist to that sort of genre, where this is its own a sort of fever dream.
Your first two films to me feel a little bit like Paul Thomas Anderson, a bit shaggy, a bit, a little bit rough around the edges, which is something that I dig. Like, I like that. This one is like so far apart from that.
Yeah, this one's a trip. It is. And again, it's sort of like something that can catch you or not catch you and at the moment. And it's something that when we were in early feedback screenings, people were like, it's going to be interesting for you for people who do know your work to sort of how do you set up the expectations that this is pretty different in some ways and very similar in others. Uh, but the reason wasn't calculated. I mean, the reason was because it felt like the right way to tell this story.
Mhm.
So we were sort of, it started with like, it started with, okay, we got Vanessa. What kind of thing do we want to tell? We came up with this idea. It's like, what do we sort of have? I've been working with these kids on this other project. It's like, we have these amazing kids. I think it makes sense for somebody who's trying to find their identity to latch on to teenagers who are at that age where they're sort of searching and finding their identity, which is true and also a little bit of a way for me to get these kids that I thought were awesome into the movie.
Yeah.
And then it's sort of like, well, how do we tell this story? And I think that the right way for us to tell that story was more surreal and with more surreal touches, with more emotional filmmaking. The score, the way that I worked with Nick Bertel on the score was very different than I'd worked with him on the other two, and really about getting in the character's head, whereas the other two, it's really about what do we want the audience to be feeling right now.
I have to ask you about those kids that you brought into the movie. Simon Brickner, I think, is terrific in this. But all of them really who come in and kind of talk about themselves to Vanessa in the movie. Were those lines scripted, or were they felt sort of free and so I was curious about that.
In the interviews, in the non-interview segment scenes with them, it's a mix
Mhm.
of scripted intensely, scripted loosely, and like tell that story, just talk for a little bit, you know. And so it's a combination. It's not an improv movie, but there were some times where we would go like, okay, we're gonna run for like 10 minutes. You guys just sort of do whatever happens, and then it was like, all right, now let's do the warm world. Now let's do this. So let's do, um, the interviews were unscripted, but came from months and months of rehearsal and work with the kids. So we really knew them, and we had talked about, we were very comfortable with each other. They really knew me. And so we created an environment that I think allowed for them to be really open and present. And some of those stories are things that we had talked about and worked on. We have so many hours and a lot more teenagers actually that were interviewed. It's this incredible sort of treasure trove that we sort of have sitting around. We don't quite know what to do with, but we have 19 hours of interview footage with about 36, 37 teenagers that are just really incredible.
And talk to me about Simon really quickly. You said you worked with all these people before. I imagine you worked with Simon before this. He's great in this, especially when he's sharing scenes with Vanessa. Talk to me a little bit about him.
Yeah, thank you. I think Simon is, I mean, I don't want to sound, I don't know how this sounds. I can be a little bit, but like, I think Simon gives a really special performance. And I'm very proud of him and I'm very proud of that performance. And I think it speaks really highly to his skill as an actor and also to Vanessa's skill as an actress, that they, look so different and they have such different styles. They come from such different worlds. One's a non-professional, one's as professional as it could be. And I think that they really gel and work together. And his role expanded throughout the process, from the rehearsal process through the initial production process. And then when we were shooting more in the winter, we kept writing more and more for him because we felt we were finding something really special with him and her, and a really special connection there. I knew him from a live variety show that I was doing. He came and he had performed on it. And he's a really interesting character. And so we thought like, oh, we're going to put him in at the party and he'll just sort of, we'll just unleash him at Vanessa. And then as we just were working with him, it was like, this is really where we think the heart of this movie is. He's the character that we end up knowing about a lot more than her. And so in some ways, she's the central character and it's her story, but he is the person that we get to know and we see him through both our eyes and her eyes. And I think, and he becomes the heart and the emotional core of it. And I'm so grateful to him.
Well, Adam, this has been fantastic. I thank you for talking with me.
Thank you so much. Thanks for going on the ride of Italian States. I know it's a little different, but I appreciate it, and I appreciate talking to you.
Oh, thank you, man. And whatever you do next, man, I hope to get to talk to you about that too. Like I said,
I love that.
so,
I love that. Thank you.
thanks again, man. Have a good one.
Appreciate
Thanks for checking out the show. If you like what we're laying down, please subscribe to our channel and click the bell to receive notifications for all of our latest stuff.